The dust from the stagecoach wheels settled behind her like the life she was desperate to leave buried in Tennessee. And as Lorraine Turner stepped onto the sun-baked streets of Austin, Texas, in the summer of 1872, she made herself a silent promise that no man would ever make her feel small again. The afternoon heat hit her like a wall as she gripped her worn leather travel bag, the only possession she truly cared about anymore. Inside were 3 dresses, a photograph she could not bring herself to burn, and enough money to last maybe 2 months if she was careful. The rest of her savings had gone to the stagecoach fare that brought her all the way from Nashville, where Richard had left her standing at the altar 6 months ago, the pitying stares of 200 wedding guests burning into her back as she realized he was not coming. But that was not even the worst of it. Richard had not just abandoned her. He had taken her father's investment money, the funds meant to expand the family textile business, and disappeared with Margaret Whitfield, Lorraine's own cousin. The scandal had destroyed her family's reputation. Her father had died of a heart attack 3 months later, and her mother had made it clear that Lorraine's poor judgment in men had contributed to his death. Those words, spoken in grief and anger, had cut deeper than any of Richard's betrayals. So Lorraine had packed what little she had left and pointed herself west, toward a place where nobody knew her name or her shame. Austin was bigger than she had expected, with wide streets and buildings that seemed to reach ambitiously toward the cloudless sky. The Capitol building was under construction, with workers scrambling over scaffolding in the distance. Cowboys rode past on horseback, and women in bonnets hurried along the wooden sidewalks. The town hummed with energy and possibility, but Lorraine felt numb to it all. She needed to find work and lodging in that order. The newspaper advertisement she had seen in St. Louis had mentioned that Austin needed school teachers, seamstresses, and housekeepers. Lorraine could do all 3 if necessary. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. The first boarding house she tried was full. The second was run by a suspicious woman who looked at Lorraine's ringless hand and decent clothing with narrowed eyes, as if trying to determine what kind of trouble she was running from. Lorraine left before the woman could ask questions she had no intention of answering. By the 3rd try, the sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if Lorraine had the energy to notice. Mrs. Abigail Fletcher's boarding house stood at the end of a quiet street, a 2-story structure with a wide porch and flower boxes that actually had living flowers in them. It looked like the kind of place where people might be decent to each other, and Lorraine felt a small flutter of hope as she knocked on the door. The woman who answered was in her 50s, with gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical bun and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "Can I help you, dear? I am looking for a room to rent," Lorraine said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I just arrived in Austin today and I will be looking for work tomorrow. I can pay for 2 weeks in advance." Mrs. Fletcher studied her for a moment, and Lorraine prepared herself for more suspicious questions. Instead, the woman smiled. "You look exhausted. Come in and have some tea first, and then we can talk about rooms and rent." The kindness was so unexpected that Lorraine felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back furiously as she followed Mrs. Fletcher inside. The boarding house was clean and comfortable, with simple furniture and the smell of fresh bread coming from somewhere in the back. "Sit down," Mrs. Fletcher said, gesturing to a chair in the parlor. "I will be right back with that tea." Lorraine sat, her body finally acknowledging how tired she was. The journey from Tennessee had taken 2 weeks, with countless stops and transfers, sleeping on hard stage-coach benches and in questionable roadside inns. She had not allowed herself to really rest, afraid that if she stopped moving, the pain and shame would catch up to her. Mrs. Fletcher returned with tea and a plate of bread with butter. "Eat something. You look half-starved." Lorraine had not realized how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. She ate slowly, trying to maintain some dignity, while Mrs. Fletcher sat across from her with her own cup of tea. "I have a room available on the second floor," Mrs. Fletcher said. "It is small but clean, with a good bed and a window that gets morning light. I charge $2 a week, which includes breakfast and supper. You are welcome to use the kitchen if you need to prepare anything else." $2 a week was more than fair. Lorraine had been prepared to pay considerably more. "That would be perfect, thank you." "What brings you to Austin?" Mrs. Fletcher asked, her tone conversational rather than prying. Lorraine had prepared an answer for this question. "I needed a fresh start. I heard there were opportunities here for women willing to work." Mrs. Fletcher nodded as if this explanation was perfectly sufficient. "There is always work for those who want it. What kind of work are you looking for? I can teach or keep house, whatever is available." The schoolhouse might need help. The teacher they had last year married and moved to San Antonio. Or there is the general store. Old Mr. Brennan is always complaining about needing help with the books. Mrs. Fletcher paused, studying Lorraine again. "But honestly, dear, you should take a day or two to rest before you start looking. You have the look of someone who has been running for a while." Lorraine's throat tightened. "I cannot afford to waste time." "Resting is not wasting time, but it is your choice, of course." Mrs. Fletcher stood. "Come on, I will show you to your room." The room was everything Mrs. Fletcher had promised. Small but spotlessly clean, with a narrow bed covered in a faded quilt, a washstand with a chipped basin, and a window that looked out over the street. Lorraine set down her bag and sat on the bed, feeling the softness of the mattress beneath her. "Thank you," she said quietly. Mrs. Fletcher smiled. "Supper is at 6 o'clock. Come down when you are ready." After the door closed, Lorraine lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. She had made it to Austin. She had found a place to stay. Tomorrow she would find work, and she would begin building a new life, one where Richard and Margaret and the pitying stares of Nashville society could not touch her. She would not think about love or marriage or trust ever again. Those were the things that had destroyed her, and she was done with all of it. That night, Lorraine met the other boarders at supper. There was Mr. and Mrs. Davis, an older couple who had recently moved from Missouri. There was Sarah Chapman, a young widow who worked as a seamstress. And there was Thomas Wright, a clerk at the land office who blushed every time Sarah spoke to him. They were all pleasant and polite, asking Lorraine the usual questions about where she was from and what brought her to Austin. She gave vague, pleasant answers and deflected as much as she could. By the end of the meal, she thought she had managed to avoid revealing anything too personal. Mrs. Fletcher's cooking was excellent, and Lorraine ate more than she had in weeks. The other boarders talked about local news, about the construction of the new Capitol building and the railroad expansion, and the recent troubles with cattle rustlers to the south. Lorraine listened but did not contribute much. She was too tired, and besides, she knew nothing about this place yet. After supper, she retreated to her room and unpacked her few belongings. She took out the photograph last, staring at it for a long moment before tucking it into the bottom drawer of the washstand. It was a picture of her and Richard, taken the day he had proposed. She was smiling in it, her eyes full of hope and happiness. She looked like a different person. Lorraine changed into her nightgown and climbed into bed, expecting to fall asleep immediately. Instead, she lay awake for hours, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Austin at night. Dogs barking in the distance, the occasional sound of hoofbeats on the street, voices from the saloon a few blocks away. She thought about her mother, who had barely said goodbye when Lorraine left Nashville. She thought about her father, buried in the family plot beside his parents and grandparents, all the Turners who had built their lives in Tennessee. She was the first to leave, the first to break that chain, and she thought, despite herself, about Richard. About the way he had looked at her when he proposed, like she was the only woman in the world. Had it all been lies? Had he been planning to betray her even then? Or had he genuinely cared for her once, before Margaret had turned his head with her beauty and her willingness to run away with him? Lorraine rolled onto her side and forced herself to stop thinking. It did not matter anymore. None of it mattered. She was in Austin now, and she was going to build a new life, and she was never going to let anyone hurt her again. The next morning, Lorraine woke to bright sunlight streaming through the window. She dressed quickly in her most practical dress, a dark blue cotton that had seen better days but was still respectable. She pinned her blonde hair into a neat bun and went downstairs for breakfast. Mrs. Fletcher had prepared eggs and bacon and fresh biscuits. Lorraine ate quickly, eager to begin her search for work. The other boarders had already left for their various jobs, and Mrs. Fletcher was cleaning up the kitchen. "Where would you recommend I start looking for work?" Lorraine asked. "Try the general store first," Mrs. Fletcher said. "It is just down the street, 3 blocks east. Ask for Mr. Brennan. Tell him I sent you." Lorraine thanked her and set out. The morning was already warm, promising another hot day. She walked down the street with purpose, trying to look confident and capable, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach. The general store was a large building with a false front and big windows displaying everything from farming equipment to ladies' hats. A bell jingled as Lorraine pushed open the door. Inside, the store was packed with goods, shelves rising to the ceiling and barrels of flour and sugar lining the walls. The smell of coffee and leather and tobacco filled the air. An older man with white hair and spectacles stood behind the counter, helping a customer. Lorraine waited patiently until he was finished. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his tone brisk but not unkind. "Are you Mr. Brennan?" "I am." "Mrs. Fletcher sent me. I am looking for work, and she mentioned you might need help with bookkeeping." Mr. Brennan looked her up and down, assessing. "Do you have experience with accounts?" "Yes, sir. I helped manage the books for my father's business back in Tennessee." "What kind of business?" "Textiles." "We dealt with suppliers, customers, inventory management, and payroll." Mr. Brennan nodded slowly. "I could use help. My eyesight is not what it used to be, and the numbers give me headaches. How is your handwriting?" "Very clear, sir." "When can you start?" Lorraine blinked, surprised at how quickly this was happening. "Today, if you need me. Come back tomorrow morning at 7. I will pay you $8 a week to start, and if you work out, we can discuss an increase after the first month." $8 a week was more than Lorraine had hoped for. It would cover her room and board with money left over to save. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan. I will be here at 7 tomorrow." She left the store feeling lighter than she had in months. She had been in Austin less than a day, and she already had a job and a place to stay. Maybe this fresh start was exactly what she needed. Lorraine spent the rest of the day exploring Austin, familiarizing herself with the streets and the businesses and the layout of the town. She found the schoolhouse, a small white building at the edge of town. She found the church, the sheriff's office, the doctor's office, and the newspaper office. She walked past saloons and restaurants and a hotel that looked much fancier than Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house. She also found the livery stable, a large structure at the south end of town where horses stamped and nickered in their stalls. A sign above the entrance read, "Vance Livery and Stables." Lorraine was about to walk past when a man emerged from the stable, leading a magnificent black horse. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing worn jeans, a blue work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and a brown hat pulled low over his eyes. He moved with an easy confidence, one hand on the horse's bridle as he spoke softly to the animal. He looked up and caught Lorraine staring. For a moment their eyes met, and Lorraine felt an odd jolt, like a spark of recognition even though she had never seen him before in her life. His eyes were a striking dark blue, and there was something in his gaze that was both gentle and knowing. "Morning, miss," he said, tipping his hat. "Good morning," Lorraine replied, then quickly looked away and continued walking. Her heart was beating faster and she felt flustered in a way that annoyed her. She was not interested in men, not anymore. She had promised herself. But as she walked back toward the boarding house, she could not quite shake the image of those blue eyes and that quiet confidence. She did not know his name, did not know anything about him, and she told herself firmly that she did not care. The next morning, Lorraine arrived at the general store at precisely 7 o'clock. Mr. Brennan was already there, unlocking the door. He showed her to a small office in the back, where ledgers and receipts were stacked in precarious piles. "It is a bit of a mess," Mr. Brennan admitted. "My wife used to handle the books, but she passed 2 years ago, and I have been struggling to keep up ever since." Lorraine looked at the chaos and felt a sense of purpose. This was something she could fix, something she could control. "I will have it organized in no time." And she did. Over the next week, Lorraine threw herself into the work, arriving early and staying late. She organized the receipts, updated the ledgers, and created a system that would be easy for Mr. Brennan to maintain. She discovered several errors in the accounts, including a supplier who had been overcharging for months. Mr. Brennan was so impressed that he gave her a raise at the end of the first week. The work kept Lorraine busy, which was exactly what she wanted. She did not have time to think about Nashville or Richard or anything else from her past. She ate breakfast and supper at the boarding house, worked during the day, and spent her evenings reading in her room or helping Mrs. Fletcher with small tasks around the house. She was settling into a routine, a new life that was quiet and predictable and safe. But then, on a Saturday afternoon 2 weeks after she arrived in Austin, everything changed. Lorraine had finished her work at the general store early, and Mr. Brennan had given her the rest of the day off. She decided to walk to the edge of town, where there was a small creek she had discovered on one of her explorations. It was a peaceful spot, shaded by cottonwood trees, and she thought it might be nice to sit by the water and enjoy the rare moment of leisure. She was walking along the creek bank, watching the water ripple over smooth stones, when she heard a sound that made her freeze. It was a growl, low and menacing, coming from somewhere in the brush to her right. Lorraine turned slowly and saw the dog. It was large and thin, with matted fur and wild eyes. A stray, probably, or maybe a ranch dog that had gone feral. It was crouched low, its lips pulled back to show its teeth, and it was focused entirely on her. Lorraine's breath caught in her throat. She knew enough about animals to know that running would be the worst thing she could do. But she also knew that standing still might not be enough. The dog looked desperate and mean, and she had nothing to defend herself with. "Easy," she said softly, trying to keep her voice calm even though her heart was pounding. "Easy, boy." The dog snarled and took a step toward her, and then from behind her a voice said, "Do not move." Lorraine obeyed, staying perfectly still as she heard footsteps approaching. The man moved past her, positioning himself between her and the dog. He was tall and familiar, and Lorraine realized with a start that it was the man from the livery stable, the one with the blue eyes. He did not raise his voice or make any sudden movements. He simply stood there solid and calm and looked at the dog. "Go on," he said quietly. "Get out of here." For a moment, nothing happened. The dog continued to snarl, its body tense and ready to attack. Then, slowly, it backed away. It turned and loped off into the brush, disappearing from sight. The man watched until he was sure the dog was gone, then turned to Lorraine. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Lorraine said, though her hands were shaking. "Thank you. That dog has been causing trouble for weeks. Someone needs to catch it before it bites someone." He looked at her more closely. "You are the new woman at the boarding house, right? Mrs. Fletcher's place?" "Yes, I am Lorraine Turner. Dalton Vance," he said, extending his hand. "I run the livery stable." Lorraine shook his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. "I remember seeing you. Thank you for helping me just now." "You should not be out here alone," Dalton said. "This part of the creek is too isolated. If that dog had attacked, no one would have heard you." "I did not realize," Lorraine said, feeling foolish. She had been so focused on finding a quiet place to think that she had not considered the danger. "Come on," Dalton said. "I will walk you back to town." Lorraine wanted to protest, to insist that she did not need his help, but the truth was that she was still shaken. So she nodded and walked beside him, back along the creek and toward the town. They walked in silence for a few minutes. Lorraine was acutely aware of Dalton's presence beside her, the way he moved with that easy confidence, the way he kept glancing at her as if to make sure she was truly all right. "How are you liking Austin?" Dalton asked eventually. "It is different from what I am used to," Lorraine said carefully, "but I am settling in." "Where are you from? Tennessee?" "That is a long way to come." Lorraine did not respond. She did not want to talk about why she had come or what she was running from. She had learned that the less she said, the fewer questions people asked. But Dalton did not press. He simply nodded and said, "Well, Austin is a good town. People here are decent for the most part. If you need anything, you can ask." "Thank you," Lorraine said, surprised by the genuine kindness in his voice. They reached the edge of town, and Lorraine expected Dalton to leave her there. But he continued walking with her, all the way back to Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house. "Thank you again for your help," Lorraine said when they reached the front porch. "It was nothing," Dalton said. He tipped his hat. "Take care, Miss Turner." He walked away, and Lorraine watched him go, feeling that same odd flutter in her chest that she had felt the first time she saw him. She pushed the feeling away and went inside, determined not to think about Dalton Vance, or his blue eyes, or the way he had stepped between her and danger without a moment's hesitation. But that night, as she lay in bed, she found herself thinking about him anyway. Over the next few weeks, Lorraine kept seeing Dalton around town. It seemed like everywhere she went, he was there. She would be walking to the general store, and he would ride past on horseback, tipping his hat in greeting. She would be buying fabric at the dry goods store, and he would be there picking up supplies, always polite and always with that quiet smile. She learned, through the idle gossip of the other boarders and Mrs. Fletcher's occasional comments, that Dalton Vance was well respected in Austin. He had come to Texas 5 years ago from Virginia, after the war had left his family's farm in ruins. He had worked as a ranch hand for a few years before saving enough money to buy the livery stable. He was known for being honest, hardworking, and good with horses. He was 26 years old, unmarried, and according to Sarah Chapman, half the single women in Austin had set their sights on him at one time or another. Lorraine told herself that none of this mattered to her. She was not interested in Dalton Vance or any other man. She was focused on her work and her new life, and that was enough. But then, one evening in early October, Dalton showed up at Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house. Lorraine was in the parlor, mending a tear in one of her dresses when Mrs. Fletcher came in and said, "Lorraine, you have a visitor." Lorraine looked up, confused. She did not know anyone in Austin well enough to expect visitors. "Who is it?" "Dalton Vance. He is on the porch." Lorraine's heart did a strange little skip. She set down her sewing and went to the door. Dalton was standing on the porch, hat in hand, looking slightly nervous. "Miss Turner," he said, "I hope I am not intruding." "Not at all," Lorraine said, though she felt flustered. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing wrong. I just wanted to ask if you might like to go to the church social tomorrow evening. There is a dance and a potluck supper, and I thought you might enjoy it." Lorraine stared at him, caught completely off guard. A dance. He was asking her to a dance, which meant he was courting her, or at least trying to. "I do not think that would be a good idea," she said quickly. "Thank you for asking, but I am not interested in socializing right now." Dalton studied her for a moment, and Lorraine saw a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. But he did not argue. He simply nodded and said, "I understand. I am sorry for bothering you." "You are not bothering me," Lorraine said, and then, because she felt guilty for the hurt in his voice, she added, "I just need to focus on my work right now. I am not looking for anything else." "Fair enough," Dalton said. He put his hat back on and tipped it to her. "Good evening, Miss Turner." He left, and Lorraine went back inside, feeling oddly hollow. Mrs. Fletcher was waiting in the parlor, her expression knowing. "That was a mistake," Mrs. Fletcher said gently. "What was?" "Turning him down. Dalton Vance is a good man, and he clearly likes you." "I am not interested in being courted," Lorraine said firmly. "I came to Austin to start over, not to get involved with someone." Mrs. Fletcher sighed. "I do not know what happened to you back in Tennessee, and I am not going to pry. But whatever it was, do not let it keep you from living, Lorraine. You are young, and you have your whole life ahead of you." Lorraine did not respond. She picked up her sewing and focused on the neat, precise stitches, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. But as the days passed, she found herself thinking about Dalton more and more. She would see him in town and feel a pull toward him that she could not explain. She would lie awake at night, remembering the way he had stood between her and the dog, the way he had looked at her with those blue eyes, the way he had asked her to the dance with such hopeful nervousness. She told herself it did not matter. She had made the right decision. Getting involved with Dalton would only lead to pain, and she had had enough pain to last a lifetime. But then, one afternoon in late October, everything changed again. Lorraine was working in the back office of the general store when she heard raised voices from the front. She set down her pen and went to see what was happening. Mr. Brennan was standing behind the counter, facing two rough-looking men. They were both armed with pistols on their hips, and they had the hard, mean look of men who were used to taking what they wanted. "I told you I do not have that much cash on hand," Mr. Brennan was saying, his voice shaking slightly. "I can give you what is in the register, but that is all." "That is not good enough," one of the men said. He was tall and thin with a scar across his cheek. "We know you have more. Open the safe." "I cannot do that," Mr. Brennan said. The man pulled his pistol and pointed it at Mr. Brennan. "Open the safe, old man, or I will put a bullet in you." Lorraine's heart was pounding, but she forced herself to stay calm. She stepped forward, drawing the men's attention. "Please do not hurt him. I will open the safe." The scarred man turned his gun toward her. "Who are you?" "I work here. I know the combination." Lorraine kept her voice steady even though she was terrified. "Just do not hurt anyone." The scarred man considered this, then nodded. "Open it." Lorraine moved to the safe in the corner, her hands shaking as she worked the combination. She could feel both men watching her, their tension filling the room like a storm about to break. The safe door swung open, revealing stacks of bills and bags of coins. The scarred man pushed past her and started grabbing the money, stuffing it into a sack. "Please," Mr. Brennan said. "That is everything I have. That is meant to pay my suppliers. Not my problem, the scarred man said. And then, from the doorway, a voice said, I suggest you put that money back. Everyone turned. Dalton Vance stood in the doorway, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. His expression was calm, but there was steel in his eyes. The scarred man turned his gun toward Dalton. This is none of your business, cowboy. I am making it my business, Dalton said. He took a step inside, his movements deliberate and controlled. You have two choices. You can put the money back and leave, or you can try to shoot me. But I promise you, if you pull that trigger, you will not make it out of this store alive. The second man, who had been silent until now, shifted nervously. Come on, let us just go. This is not worth it. The scarred man hesitated, his gun still pointed at Dalton. Lorraine held her breath, terrified that someone was about to die, and then, slowly, the scarred man lowered his gun. This is not over, he said to Dalton. Yes, it is, Dalton said. Now get out of here before I change my mind about letting you walk. The two men left, moving quickly, and Lorraine heard their horses gallop away. She let out a shaky breath, her legs suddenly weak. Dalton holstered his pistol and turned to Mr. Brennan. Are you all right? Yes, thanks to you, Mr. Brennan said. And to Miss Turner. She was very brave. Dalton looked at Lorraine, and she saw concern in his eyes. Are you hurt? No, Lorraine said. Just shaken. Dalton crossed the room to her, and before she could protest, he took her hands in his. You should not have stepped in like that. They could have hurt you. I could not just stand there and let them shoot Mr. Brennan, Lorraine said. Still, Dalton said, his voice rough with emotion. You scared me. Lorraine looked up at him and saw the fear and the relief and something else in his eyes, something that made her breath catch. He cared about her. Really cared about her. Thank you for coming, she said softly. I was walking past and saw them go in. I knew something was wrong. Dalton released her hands, though he seemed reluctant to do so. I am going to report this to the sheriff. Those men are probably long gone by now, but it is worth trying. After Dalton left, Lorraine helped Mr. Brennan secure the safe and lock up the store. Her hands were still shaking, and she could not stop replaying the moment when the scarred man had pointed his gun at Mr. Brennan, when she had thought someone was going to die. And she could not stop thinking about the way Dalton had looked at her, the way he had held her hands, the way he had said, You scared me. That evening, Lorraine sat in her room and admitted something to herself that she had been trying to deny for weeks. She had feelings for Dalton Vance. Real, deep feelings that terrified her because she had sworn she would never let herself care about a man again. But Dalton was not Richard. Dalton was honest and brave and kind. He had stepped between her and danger twice now, without hesitation. He had asked her to a dance with nervous hope, and he had accepted her rejection with grace. And when he had looked at her today, she had seen something in his eyes that Richard's eyes had never held. Genuine care. Genuine fear at the thought of her being hurt. Maybe, she thought, maybe Mrs. Fletcher was right. Maybe she should not let her past keep her from living. The next day, Lorraine went to the livery stable. Dalton was in one of the stalls, brushing down a chestnut mare. He looked up when she entered, surprise crossing his face. Miss Turner, is everything all right? Yes, Lorraine said. Her heart was pounding, but she made herself continue. I wanted to thank you again for yesterday, and I wanted to apologize. Apologize for what? For turning you down when you asked me to the church social. I was not fair to you. Dalton set down the brush and stepped out of the stall. You do not owe me an apology. You have every right to say no. I know, Lorraine said, but I said no for the wrong reasons. I was afraid, and I let that fear make my decisions for me. Dalton studied her, and she saw understanding in his eyes. What were you afraid of? Lorraine took a breath. She had not talked about Richard or Nashville or any of it since she left Tennessee. But standing here in front of Dalton, she felt like she could, like he would listen without judgment. "I was engaged once," she said quietly, "back in Tennessee. His name was Richard, and I thought he loved me, but on our wedding day he did not show up. He ran off with my cousin and stole money from my family. The scandal destroyed my father's business and his reputation. He died 3 months later and my mother blamed me. So I left. I came to Austin to start over and I promised myself I would never trust a man again." Dalton's expression softened. "I am sorry, that must have been terrible." "It was," Lorraine said. "But I am realizing that hiding from the possibility of pain also means hiding from the possibility of happiness. And I do not want to do that anymore." "What are you saying?" Dalton asked, his voice gentle. Lorraine met his eyes. "I am saying that if the offer is still open, I would like to go to the next church social with you." A slow smile spread across Dalton's face, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "The offer is definitely still open." "Good," Lorraine said, and she smiled back, feeling lighter than she had in months. Dalton stepped closer. "There is something you should know about me too. I do not give up easily. If I care about someone, I am going to do everything I can to make sure they are happy and safe. So if you are going to give me a chance, you need to know that I am going to care about you, a lot." "That sounds terrifying," Lorraine said honestly. "It probably is," Dalton agreed, "but I think you are brave enough to handle it." And looking at him, at the warmth and honesty in his eyes, Lorraine thought maybe he was right. The church social was held the following Saturday evening. Lorraine wore her best dress, a pale green cotton that she had not worn since leaving Tennessee. Mrs. Fletcher helped her arrange her hair, and Sarah Chapman lent her a lace shawl. Dalton arrived at the boarding house at 6 o'clock, dressed in clean trousers and a white shirt, his dark hair neatly combed. He held out his arm and Lorraine took it, feeling a flutter of nerves and excitement. The church social was held in a large barn on the outskirts of town, decorated with lanterns and bunches of dried flowers. Tables were laden with food, and a small group of musicians was setting up in the corner. The barn was already crowded with people, and Lorraine recognized many faces from around town. Dalton introduced her to people she had not met yet, and everyone was friendly and welcoming. Lorraine had been worried that people would ask questions about her past, but no one did. They seemed content to accept her as she was now, the woman who worked at the general store and lived at Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house. When the music started, Dalton led her onto the dance floor. Lorraine had not danced since the weeks before her wedding, and she had forgotten how much she enjoyed it. Dalton was a good dancer, confident but not showy, and he held her carefully, as if she were something precious. "You look beautiful tonight," he said as they moved to the music. Lorraine felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." "I clean up all right when I try," Dalton said with a grin. They danced several dances, and between them they ate supper and talked with other guests. Lorraine met more people from Austin, including the sheriff, the doctor's wife, and the woman who ran the schoolhouse. Everyone seemed to know Dalton, and it was clear that he was well liked and respected. As the evening wore on, Lorraine found herself relaxing in a way she had not in months. She laughed at Dalton's stories about difficult horses and stubborn customers at the livery. She told him about some of the more eccentric customers at the general store, and he laughed in return. It felt easy and natural, like they had known each other much longer than a few weeks. When the night was winding down, Dalton walked her back to the boarding house. The streets were quiet, lit by the soft glow of oil lamps in windows. The air was cool with a hint of the coming winter. "I had a wonderful time tonight," Lorraine said as they reached the porch. "So did I," Dalton said. He took her hand, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. "Can I see you again? Maybe take you to dinner next week. I would like that," Lorraine said. Dalton smiled, and then slowly he leaned down and kissed her cheek. It was gentle and brief, but it sent a warmth through Lorraine that she had not felt in a very long time. "Good night, Lorraine," he said softly. "Good night, Dalton." She watched him walk away, her hand pressed to her cheek where he had kissed her, and she felt something she had thought was lost forever. She felt hope. Over the next few months, Dalton and Lorraine courted properly. He took her to dinner at the hotel restaurant, and they walked by the creek on Sunday afternoons, though they stayed in the safer, more populated areas. He brought her flowers from the market, and she baked him pies using Mrs. Fletcher's kitchen. They talked about everything. Dalton told her about growing up in Virginia, about the war that had torn his family apart, about his decision to come west and start over. Lorraine told him about Nashville, about her father's business and her mother's coldness and Richard's betrayal. Dalton listened without judgment, and when she cried, he held her hand and told her that she deserved so much better than what she had been given. "You are the strongest person I know," he said one afternoon as they sat by the creek. "You lost everything, and you still had the courage to start over. That takes real strength." "I did not feel strong," Lorraine said. "I felt like I was running away." "Sometimes running away is the strongest thing you can do," Dalton said, "especially when staying would have destroyed you." Lorraine looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, and she felt her heart swell. She was falling in love with him. She had been trying to resist it, trying to protect herself, but it was useless. She loved him, and the scary, wonderful thing was that she was pretty sure he loved her too. One evening in December, Dalton took Lorraine to the top of a hill overlooking Austin. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. The town spread out below them, small and peaceful. They sat on a blanket watching the sunset, and Dalton said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Lorraine asked. "About the future, my future." He turned to look at her. "I have been saving money for a while now, and I have enough to buy some land. I have been thinking about starting a ranch, raising horses. It is something I have always wanted to do." "That sounds wonderful," Lorraine said. "You would be good at that." "The thing is," Dalton said, "I do not want to do it alone. I want someone to build that life with. Someone to share it with." Lorraine's heart was pounding. "Dalton." He took her hand. "I know we have not been courting for very long, and I know you have been hurt before, and you have every reason to be cautious, but I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You are smart and brave and beautiful, and every moment I spend with you makes me happier than I have ever been." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I love you, Lorraine. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you, right here in Texas. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to have a family with you and grow old with you." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "Will you marry me? Will you start your future right here with me?" Lorraine stared at the ring, at Dalton's hopeful, nervous face, and she felt tears streaming down her cheeks. But they were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of joy. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, I will marry you." Dalton's face lit up with a joy so pure and bright that it took Lorraine's breath away. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was not a gentle, tentative kiss like the one he had given her on the porch. It was deep and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless. Dalton rested his forehead against hers and said, "I am going to make you so happy, I promise." "You already have," Lorraine said. "You already have." They were married in January of 1873 in the small church in Austin. Mrs. Fletcher and the other boarders attended, along with Mr. Brennan and many of the people Lorraine had come to know in her months in town. Lorraine wore a new dress that Sarah Chapman had helped her make, white with lace at the collar and cuffs. Dalton wore his best suit, and he looked so handsome that Lorraine could hardly believe he was real. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Dalton kissed her with such tenderness that Lorraine felt like her heart might burst. They moved into a small house on the land Dalton had purchased, about 5 miles outside of Austin. It was not much yet, just a simple cabin and a barn and some fencing, but it was theirs. Dalton worked on building up the ranch, buying horses and training them, while Lorraine continued to work at the general store a few days a week. The first year of their marriage was not easy. Building a ranch from the ground up was hard work, and there were times when money was tight and the future felt uncertain. But they faced it all together, and that made all the difference. Dalton was everything Richard had not been. He was honest and faithful and true to his word. When he said he loved her, he meant it. When he made a promise, he kept it. He treated her like an equal partner, asking for her opinions and listening to her ideas. And Lorraine, who had thought she would never trust a man again, found herself trusting Dalton completely. She let herself love him without reservation, without the fear that he would betray her. Because she knew, deep in her bones, that he never would. By the spring of 1874, the ranch was starting to thrive. Dalton had a reputation for training excellent horses, and people came from all over to buy from him. Lorraine had quit her job at the general store to focus on the ranch, and she discovered that she loved the work. She loved caring for the horses, loved managing the accounts, loved building something with Dalton. And in the summer of 1874, Lorraine discovered she was pregnant. She told Dalton one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. He stared at her for a long moment, as if he could not quite believe what he had heard. Then he let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his eyes shining. "We are going to be parents." "We are," Lorraine said, and she felt a happiness so complete that it was almost overwhelming. Their son was born in February of 1875, a healthy baby with dark hair and blue eyes like his father. They named him Samuel, after Dalton's father. Lorraine had never known she could love anyone as much as she loved that tiny, squirming bundle, except perhaps Dalton himself. Dalton was a wonderful father. He was patient and gentle, and he doted on Samuel with a devotion that made Lorraine's heart melt. He would spend hours rocking the baby to sleep, singing soft lullabies in a voice that was surprisingly sweet. As Samuel grew, so did the ranch. Dalton hired a few ranch hands to help with the work, and Lorraine managed the business side, keeping the books and handling correspondence with buyers. They were making a good life for themselves, a life built on hard work and love and trust. In the spring of 1877, their second child was born, a daughter they named Emma. She had Lorraine's blonde hair and a determined spirit that made everyone laugh. Samuel adored his little sister, and he took his role as big brother very seriously. Lorraine sometimes thought about her life in Nashville, about the woman she had been before Richard's betrayal. That woman felt like a stranger now. The Lorraine who had arrived in Austin, broken and afraid, determined never to trust again, also felt like a distant memory. She was a different person now. Stronger, happier, more whole. And it was all because Dalton had seen something in her that she had not been able to see in herself. He had seen her strength and her courage, and he had loved her for it. One evening in the summer of 1878, Lorraine and Dalton sat on the porch, watching Samuel and Emma play in the yard. Samuel was 3 now, and Emma was just over a year old, toddling around after her brother with determined concentration. "You ever regret it?" Dalton asked suddenly. Lorraine looked at him. "Regret what?" "Leaving Tennessee, coming to Austin, taking a chance on me." Lorraine smiled and took his hand. "Not for a single moment. Coming to Austin was the best decision I ever made. It brought me to you." Dalton squeezed her hand. "I think about that sometimes, about how things might have been different. If that dog had not scared you by the creek, I might never have talked to you. If those men had not tried to rob the general store, you might never have given me a chance." "I think we would have found our way to each other eventually," Lorraine said. "Some things are just meant to be." "I like to think so too," Dalton said. He pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling utterly content. Over the next few years, the ranch continued to grow. Dalton became known throughout Texas for his skill with horses, and buyers came from as far as San Antonio and Fort Worth. They built a bigger house, with room for the children to grow, and for the family they hoped to continue expanding. In 1880, their third child was born, another son they named Daniel. And in 1883, they had their fourth and final child, a daughter they named Rose. Lorraine had never imagined she could be this happy. She had a husband who loved her deeply, 4 beautiful children, and a home that she had helped build with her own hands. The pain of her past had faded to a distant memory, something that had happened to someone else. She wrote to her mother occasionally, though the letters were always brief and formal. Her mother had never forgiven her for leaving, had never acknowledged her grandchildren. Lorraine had made peace with that. She could not change her mother's heart, and she was not going to waste energy trying. Instead, she focused on the life she had now, the family she had created with Dalton. And every day, she thanked God for bringing her to Austin, for bringing her to Dalton, for giving her a second chance at happiness. One day in the spring of 1885, Lorraine was in town buying supplies when she saw a familiar face. It took her a moment to place him, and then she realized with a shock that it was Richard. He looked older, harder, with lines around his eyes and mouth that had not been there before. He was standing outside the saloon, talking to another man, and he had not seen her yet. Lorraine's first instinct was to turn and walk away to avoid any confrontation. But then she stopped. She was not the same woman Richard had left standing at the altar. She was not afraid of him anymore. She walked up to him and he turned, his eyes widening in recognition. "Lorraine!" "Hello, Richard," she said calmly. He stared at her, clearly caught off guard. "I did not expect to see you here. I heard you had left Tennessee, but I did not know where you went." "I came to Austin to start over," Lorraine said. "And I did." Richard glanced at her left hand at the gold wedding band. "You are married." "I am, happily. We have 4 children and a ranch outside of town." Richard looked uncomfortable. "That is good. I am glad things worked out for you." "What are you doing in Austin?" Lorraine asked. "Just passing through. I am heading to California." He hesitated, then said, "Lorraine, I want to apologize for what I did, for leaving you like that. It was wrong and I am sorry." Lorraine studied him and realized that she felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no lingering hurt. Richard was just a man, a stranger who had once been part of her life but was not anymore. "I appreciate the apology," she said, "but I do not need it. What you did hurt me at the time, but it also set me free. If you had not left, I would have married you and I would have spent my life with the wrong man. Instead, I found the right one, so in a way I should thank you." Richard looked taken aback. "I do not know what to say." "You do not need to say anything," Lorraine said. "I hope you find whatever it is you are looking for, Richard. But my life is here now, and it is a good one. Goodbye." She walked away, leaving him standing there, and she did not look back. When she reached the wagon where Dalton was loading supplies, he looked at her with concern. "Are you all right? You look like you have seen a ghost." "I just ran into Richard," Lorraine said. "The man I was engaged to in Tennessee." Dalton's expression darkened. "What did he want?" To apologize. "But it does not matter. He is nothing to me now." She took Dalton's hand. "You are my life. You and the children. Richard is just a part of my past that I have left behind." Dalton pulled her into a hug. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Lorraine said. As they drove home, Lorraine thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had come to Austin broken and afraid, determined to forget her painful past. And Dalton had looked at her and said, in his own way, "Start your future right here." And she had. She had started a new life, a better life, a life filled with love and family and purpose. She had learned to trust again, to love again, to believe that happiness was possible. The years passed, and Lorraine and Dalton grew older together. Their children grew up strong and healthy, each of them inheriting their parents' work ethic and determination. Samuel took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch as Dalton got older, while Emma became a skilled horse trainer in her own right. Daniel went to college and became a teacher, and Rose married a rancher from a neighboring property. Lorraine and Dalton became grandparents, and then great-grandparents. They watched their family grow and flourish, and they took pride in everything their children and grandchildren accomplished. They spent their evenings on the porch, just as they always had, watching the sunset and talking about everything and nothing. Dalton's hair turned gray, and Lorraine's face gained lines, but the love between them never faded. If anything, it grew deeper and stronger with each passing year. In the spring of 1910, Dalton fell ill. The doctor said it was his heart, weakened by years of hard work and age. Lorraine nursed him as best she could, but they both knew he did not have much time left. One evening, as the sun was setting, Dalton took Lorraine's hand and said, "I have had a good life, the best life, all because of you." "Because of us," Lorraine corrected, her voice thick with tears. "We built this life together." "I love you," Dalton said. "I have loved you from the moment I saw you standing outside the livery stable, looking lost and determined all at once." "I love you too," Lorraine said. "You saved me, Dalton. You showed me that I could trust again, that I could love again. You gave me everything." Dalton smiled, and it was the same warm, gentle smile he had given her so many times over the years. "You were always strong enough to save yourself. I just helped you see it." He died peacefully that night, with Lorraine holding his hand. The funeral was large, with people coming from all over Texas to pay their respects. Dalton had been well loved and well respected, and everyone had a story to tell about his kindness, his honesty, his skill with horses. Lorraine stood at the graveside, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and she said goodbye to the man who had been her partner, her best friend, her love for 37 years. After the funeral, Lorraine continued to live on the ranch. Samuel and his family moved into the main house with her, insisting that she should not be alone. She spent her days helping with the grandchildren, tending her garden and sitting on the porch in the evenings, remembering. She thought about the young woman who had arrived in Austin in 1872, running from a painful past and determined never to love again. She thought about Dalton, about the way he had looked at her and seen not her pain but her strength. She thought about the life they had built together, the family they had created, the love that had sustained them through good times and bad, and she felt grateful. Grateful for every moment, every memory, every year they had shared. One evening, as she sat on the porch watching the sunset, her great-granddaughter came and sat beside her. The little girl was 5 years old, with blonde hair and blue eyes, a perfect blend of Lorraine and Dalton. "Great-grandma," the little girl said, "will you tell me a story?" "What kind of story?" Lorraine asked. "A love story. Mama says you and great-grandpa had the best love story ever." Lorraine smiled, feeling a bittersweet ache in her chest. "We did. Do you want to hear how we met?" The little girl nodded eagerly, so Lorraine told her. She told her about arriving in Austin, lost and afraid. She told her about the dog by the creek, about Dalton stepping between her and danger. She told her about the robbery at the general store, about the church social, about the proposal on the hill overlooking town. "And then what happened?" the little girl asked. "Then we got married, and we built this ranch, and we had 4 children who grew up to have children of their own, and we loved each other every single day for the rest of his life." "That is a good story," the little girl said. "Great-grandpa must have been a very special man." "He was," Lorraine said. "He told me once to start my future right here with him, and I did, and it was the best decision I ever made." The little girl snuggled against her, and Lorraine wrapped an arm around her, feeling the warmth of family and love and continuity. This was Dalton's legacy, she thought. Not just the ranch or the horses, but this family, these children and grandchildren who carried his strength and kindness forward into the world. And as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Lorraine closed her eyes and felt at peace. She had lived a full life, a good life, a life filled with more love than she had ever thought possible. She had come to Austin to forget a painful past, and she had found so much more. She had found healing and hope, and a future she could never have imagined. She had found Dalton, and he had shown her that love was not about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up every day, choosing each other, building something together one moment at a time. Lorraine lived for 5 more years after Dalton's death, surrounded by her family, watching her great-grandchildren grow. And when she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 68, she was buried next to Dalton on the hill, overlooking the ranch they had built together. Her children and grandchildren continued to run the ranch, keeping alive the legacy that Lorraine and Dalton had created. And they told stories about them, about the love they had shared, about the way they had built a life from nothing through hard work and determination, and unwavering devotion to each other. The ranch remained in the family for generations, a testament to the love story that had started in the summer of 1872, when a broken woman arrived in Austin looking to escape her past, and a cowboy with blue eyes and a gentle smile showed her that her future could start right there with him. And it had been a beautiful future, full of love and family and joy, everything that Lorraine had thought was lost to her forever. Dalton had given her that gift, but she had given him one in return. She had trusted him with her wounded heart, and together they had proven that love, real love, was worth the risk. Their story became part of the fabric of Austin, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them, when you are brave enough to take a chance on something new, when you choose to believe that happiness is possible even after heartbreak. And on warm summer evenings, when the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors and the wind whispered through the grass, it was said that you could feel their presence on that hill, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and had built a love that lasted not just a lifetime but for generations to come. The ranch still stands today, still run by their descendants, still carrying the name Vance. And if you visit and ask about the history of the place, someone will always tell you about Lorraine and Dalton, about the woman who came to Texas to forget her past, and the cowboy who told her to start her future, right there. It is a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of second chances, of trust, of choosing to believe in love even when you have every reason not to. And it all began on a dusty street in Austin, Texas, in the summer of 1872, when two wounded souls found each other and decided to build something beautiful together. That is the legacy they left behind. Not just land or horses or a successful ranch, but a love story that inspired everyone who heard it, a reminder that it is never too late to start over, never too late to find happiness, never too late to believe in love again. And that is exactly what Lorraine had done. She had taken the shattered pieces of her life and built something new and wonderful. She had trusted Dalton with her heart, and he had cherished it, protected it, and loved her with a devotion that never wavered. Together, they had proven that the best love stories are not the ones that start perfectly, but the ones that overcome obstacles, that choose each other every single day, that build something lasting through commitment and care and unwavering faith in each other. Lorraine had journeyed to Austin to forget a painful past, but what she found was so much more than forgetting. She found healing. She found purpose. She found family. And most importantly, she found Dalton, the cowboy who looked at her and said, in every word and action, "Start your future right here with me." And she had. And it had been the most beautiful future she could have ever imagined.